Hi everyone, and welcome back to week 9 of the Hometown Charm Sew Along hosted by Pat Sloan at her website ilovetomakequilts.com. This week's block, it's about food that your town is known for. In my instance, it's not a particular food, but it's a cafe. Goulburn is a small rural community. It was Australia's first inland city, but people that have travelled through there will know of the Paragon Cafe. So it's not a particular food, but a food place. That being said, if you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, ilovetomakequilts.com, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and I'll show you how to do it. As we do every week, folks, we start with all of our pieces cut out, and you can see here that again, I am doing the flying geese 4 at a time, and the other squares here are for our half square triangles. I've already gone ahead and drawn the diagonal corner to corner on the light squares for the half square triangles and the smaller squares for the flying geese. We just need to pair each of the light squares with both of our medium and dark fabrics to make our half square triangles, and we do this by sewing 1/4 inch either side of our drawn line. Let's go. Now that we've sewn on each side of our drawn line, we can clip these apart, trim them down the middle on the drawn line to make our 2 units, press to the darker of the 2 fabrics, and then trim them down. I will join you again in the trim down process. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I prefer to trim my half square triangles 2 at a time. I place them nesting the seams, and then I trim them just with a standard ruler with a 45-degree line. You can trim down in any fashion you like. To do it with my way, you place the diagonal line across the stitching and you make sure that there is enough room outside the required unfinished size, in this case 3.5 inches, on all 4 sides. Trim 2 sides, rotate the block, then you only need to line up your 3.5 inch marks, maintaining the diagonal across the seam, and trim the final 2 sides. With the half square triangle units done, it's now time to move on to the flying geese. As I said in the beginning, I am once again going to be doing it my 4 at a time method, as we require 4 flying geese for the block. I know I have promised to make a separate flying geese video, and that is still in the works. But for now, what you do with the 4 at a time method is you have 1 large square and 4 smaller squares. You draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on the 4 smaller squares, and you place 2 of those diagonally across the large square, matching up that drawn line, and then we sew 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line. We cut the block apart down the middle on the drawn line. We press all the peaks up. It will look like a love heart. We then place on each another one of the last 2 remaining squares, with the diagonal line going from the point up to the long flat side. So again, 1/4 inch either side of the drawn line. Cut down the drawn line to separate it into 4 units. Press the peaks up again and then trim. I will join you back at the trimming stage. ways that you can trim these down, and in the first instance I'm going to show you using the Creative Grids Ultimate Flying Geese tool. I'm pointing out on the left there that there is a sizing chart, and that tells you which reference lines to use on the tool. In this instance, I'm lining up the solid white line, which is F, in the peak of my flying geese, trimming the two sides, rotating both the block and the tool, and trimming the remaining two sides, and we have a perfect flying geese unit. You can also do this using a standard ruler, which I will show you next. It is quite simple to use a standard ruler to trim these flying geese units down when you're doing them 4 at a time. I'm indicating the bottom of the block there because it is still a straight line from when you cut your original square. So we use that as a reference to make sure that our ruler is parallel to that straight edge. We then have to make sure that our trim line is 1/4 of an inch above the peak of your flying geese unit, making sure that that's straight, and you also need to line up a central point on that peak. These flying geese units need to be 3.5 by 6.5 unfinished. So you will see that I lined up the 3.25 inch line at that peak. We now rotate the block and we ensure that we have our measurement of 3.5 by 6.5, and you can see that the side that we are trimming dissects the corner on the stitching line, and we once again have a perfectly sized flying geese unit using a standard quilting ruler. All of our pieces for the block are now made, so it's time to lay out the block for final construction. Once you have this block laid out, you will notice that we need to sew the center section together as a 4-patch, and then we'll be left with a 9-patch construction where we sew all the vertical seams and then the 2 horizontal seams. You will notice throughout this section that I am once again clipping the seams on the half square triangles to push the bulk in the other direction. If I had have thought about this ahead of time, I would have just pressed the whole seam allowance to the light side instead of the dark, because I do end up trimming both sides to have a flat, perfect block in the center. So if you are going to be constructing your block after watching this video, on the dark squares, I would suggest pressing towards the light fabric. You'll notice also, because there is a lot of bulk in the center of this 4-patch, I am pressing the seams open in this case. You will notice here that I am just finger pressing the seam allowances here in opposing directions so that I can get these pieces to nest at the final stage for the horizontal seams. I recommend putting the top row towards the center and the middle row towards the outside of the block, and the bottom row again towards the center to have perfect nesting for the final 2 seams. Thanks for joining me again this week, folks. It's a pleasure to do these videos for you. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything else that I can give you from my channel. If you haven't done so already, why don't you like the video, share it with a friend, hit the subscribe button, but most importantly, tickle the little bell to be notified of all future video releases. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye for now.